week we are in the Last Gospel of Thomas, verses 61 through 64. And we have a lot to go over this week. I'm going to try to go through it relatively quickly, but it's 4 pages of notes. So just hang in. As usual, if you need to interject at any time, please do so. You can type in the chat, you can shout out, you can raise your hand, doesn't matter. I will take any and all interaction. um, so I'm going to go ahead and read through the text in the Complete Gospels translation. This is the Robert J. Miller translation. The Nag Hammadi is slightly different, but we're just going to read through this one for now. Jesus said, "Two will recline on a couch, one will die, one will live." Salome said, "Who are you, mister? You have climbed onto my couch and eaten from my table as a stranger." Jesus said to her, "I am the one who comes from the one who is unwavering. I have been given some of the things of my Father. I am your disciple. For this reason, I say, if anyone becomes unwavering, they will be filled with light. But if anyone becomes divided, they will be filled with darkness." Jesus said, "I disclose my mysteries to those who are worthy of my mysteries. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Jesus said, "There was a rich man who had a great deal of money. He said, 'I shall invest my money so that I may sow, reap, plant, and fill my storehouses with produce, that I may lack nothing.' These were the things he was thinking in his heart, but that very night he died. Whoever has ears to hear should listen." Jesus said, "A man was receiving guests. When he had prepared the dinner, he sent his slave to invite the guests. The slave went to the first and said, 'My master invites you.' He replied, 'Some merchants owe me money. They're coming to me tonight. I have to go and give them instructions. Please excuse me from dinner.' The slave went to another and said, 'My master has invited you.' He said to him, 'I've bought a house and I've been called away for a day. I won't have any time.' He went to another and said, 'My master invites you.' He said to him, 'My friend is to be married and I have to arrange the banquet. I won't be able to come. Please excuse me from dinner.' He went to another and said, 'My master invites you.' He said to him, 'I've bought an estate and I'm going to collect the rent. I won't be able to come. Please excuse me.' The slave returned and said to his master, 'Those whom you invited to dinner have asked to be excused.' The master said to his slave, 'Go out on the roads and bring back whomever you find to have dinner.' Buyers and merchants will not enter the places of my Father." Okay, so that's the text we're going to be looking at tonight. And we're going to start out with this one right here. So, verse 61, I'm going to read this again. This is going to be in the Marvin Meyer translation. Jesus said, "Two will recline on a couch, one will die, one will live." Salome said, "Who are you, mister? You have climbed onto my couch and eaten from my table as if you are from someone." Jesus said to her, "I am the one who comes from what is whole. I was granted from the things of my Father. I am your disciple. For this reason, I say, if one is whole, one will be filled with light. But if one is divided, one will be filled with darkness." So notice there are some different words used here. So in the first translation that we read, she told him that he was as if he came from a stranger. In this translation, it says as if he came from someone. Okay. So, or she says, "You have climbed onto my couch and eaten from my table as a stranger." Okay. And I'll dig a little deeper into that in just a second, but I just want to point some of these out to you. The other one was, "For this reason, I say, if anyone becomes unwavering, they will be filled with light. You can see in this translation, it says, for this reason, I say, if one is whole, one will be filled with light. Okay. So unwavering and whole generally would be two different meanings. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in this context. Okay. If you are whole, you would generally think of one who is complete. I would consider it as, say, I have a pizza and it's cut into slices. If no slices are removed, then that's whole. There are still pieces, there are still opportunities for division, but if we put it back in the oven and the cheese melts, it's kind of like it's whole again, right? You don't really, you can't really tell where one piece ends and another begins. Now, unwavering, though, is a little bit different. Unwavering is, it brings to mind the idea of double-mindedness, right? If you are unwavering in your faith or you are unwavering in a decision, you are firm, you are steadfast, you are not going to be wishy-washy, you're not going to flip-flop, right? So I think that to look at it from the perspective of kind of the definition of both of these words is important for us. I don't think that either translation is incorrect or that one is better than the other. But it is worth noting that there were two different words used in this case. Okay. The other one is stranger. So you can see in the footnotes down here, it says the Greek for as a stranger, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so forgive me. I'm not great with Greek, but hos xenos may have been mistranslated as from one, hos ex xenos. Oh, I'm sorry, hos ex genos, or the Greek for as from whom, hos ektinos, may have been mistranslated as from someone, hos ex ektinos, with a different accent. Okay, so they opted for this translation as a stranger. I'm not sure that I would consider this. Okay, so I just had a moment here. Initially, when I thought of Christ coming from a stranger, I was kind of thinking of it in a negative context. But now that I kind of have a minute to digest it again, I actually think this is something that they just weren't familiar with, right? As from someone or as from one specifically feels feels like almost like Salome is referring to a an origin that she's unfamiliar with, right? Christ regularly went about teaching his disciples that they had the potential to have something in them that existed within them, but it was almost as if it slept. Trying to find the trying to find the words for this. He could see God within them, but they could not. And it was unfamiliar to them, so much so that they even struggled to see God within him, right? If you think about the questions that he asks his disciples, there's one instance where he asked them, who do you say that I am? And the disciples kind of fumble a little bit. They defer to what other people say, well, some say that you're from Elijah, or some say that you're from Moses, kind of like these reincarnations. But that's not what he asked them. He's like, who do you say that I am? I don't want to know what everyone else is talking about. I want to know what you think. And I think that this was an opportunity for him to allow them to express what they understood him to be. Right? Because nowadays we have this idea that Jesus is God. And I feel that kind of loses some of the meaning. I know that probably sounds strange, but hear me out. So, if we just say that Jesus is God, that Jesus came down from heaven, from his throne as God into a human form to inhabit a body, to suffer the what's the word I'm looking for? My apologies. I'm losing my words tonight. Temptations of flesh and endure the punishment despite never having committed sin. That is I almost feel like it limits God. It puts God into a box, as if he has to do that in order to understand from our perspective. Or even just limiting him into a single body. And I use the word him loosely, because I am of the belief that God is without a human understanding of gender. So not necessarily male nor female, just kind of all in one. And it's okay if you guys disagree with me on that. I respect everybody's beliefs here, but from my perspective, God is neither male nor female. But for the purposes of this, just to make it a bit easier, I'm just going to call him him. I see Christ as a full embodiment of God, in the sense that while he was fully human, he was able to ascertain the hidden wisdom of God and maintain an intimate connection with God, but still remain fully human. And again, I don't feel like that even accurately expresses the difference that I see between how the church typically teaches who Jesus is and what I believe in my heart. Yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of put into words. But if you guys have questions, if you need me to elaborate, um, yes, exactly. Um, like Jesus is Jesus, but that God resides within him just as much as God has the potential to reside within any one of us if we would only see who we are, right? So Salome saying that he is from a stranger, it's as if she is kind of asleep to who God is and how his spirit works. And if we look at this from the Gnostic perspective, right, we see that the whole kind of purpose of Christ's mission was to come down and redeem the mind of mankind, not so much from sin as much as forgetfulness. So the kind of Gnostic idea is that Christ came to redeem Sophia, the wisdom. And in some Gnostic sects, they believe that um, the creator of the physical world is a lower, lesser, kind of negative entity that descended from God ultimately, or what they refer to as the monad, this oneness that then kind of trickled down into Barbello, which would have been the splitting off into this like dualistic nature, mother and father kind of idea. And then there was the Christ, or the perfect man, sometimes referred to as Adam Kadmon in the Gnostic texts, and even in some Jewish texts as well. And then there was the Sophia, which would have been kind of like, I don't really want to say Christ's sister, more like a, I know this is going to sound terrible, but like a sister and a wife. So, you know, we all know that it was common for people to marry within their families anyway for centuries until more recently. But within the Godhead, we don't really have this concept of like an incestual relationship, because this is divinity, right? It's not um it's not human or sinful in nature, right? So Christ is the counterpart to Sophia and vice versa. So they are the perfect male and kind of like the perfect female aspects of the Godhead, right? And they are supposed to be in union with one another. But when Sophia created Yaldabaoth, which would be the Gnostic creator god, then she kind of fell from grace. And although the monad, or God that we would understand it to be, um, welcomed her back in, the mankind that was created in their image and according to their likeness was very much forgetful. They did not remember kind of that divine spark that was within them. So it became Christ's mission to come down and redeem that. And in the Gnostic tradition, there are many sects that believe that the serpent in the garden was actually the first incarnation of Christ into the physical realm to awaken the mankind that Yaldabaoth had created with his fellow archons to be in the image of Adam Kadmon, or of the original perfect man, the Christ in the heavenly realms, here on earth in the physical realm. And think about that for a second. So Adam and Eve in the garden were allowed to eat of every single tree except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And once they did eat of that, they were banished from the garden and could not eat of any of the other trees, including the tree of life. So they could have had eternal life here in the physical, but because they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that privilege was revoked. Why would God not want them to be aware of that which is good and that which is evil? Well, you could argue that he wanted to keep them pure so that they would never know sin. But then why would he put the tree there in the first place? Okay, that's one argument. The other one is maybe he just did not want them to know duality, right? To understand that, oh, if there is good, there must also be evil. If there is male, there must be female. If there is dark, there must be light. You get the idea? Or he didn't want them to know the truth of their existence and who and what they really were, divine sparks of the Almighty, perfection in physical form. So this is kind of how the Gnostics believe, and Christ was the one that was sent to redeem that Sophia wisdom in humanity. I cannot say that I do not resonate with that. I could see where that could be a possibility. I would prefer that everyone would formulate their own opinion on that. So I'm not going to give you too much of mine, but I think it is important to at least be aware of where this is coming from. In fact, this is where we get the word philosophy, philosophia, or the love of wisdom, right? And if you pay attention, you will see this gentle undercurrent throughout society for millennia of this Sophia, or this wisdom in everything. That is the word that is most commonly used in the Old Testament for wisdom. And when we read things like the Psalms, we see that wisdom is personified in a feminine nature. Usually the word she is used to refer to wisdom. So that's an interesting thing that has not escaped me for sure. So I do want to point out who Salome is. I don't know if you guys are familiar with some of the disciples that are kind of lesser known. A lot of people are familiar with Mary Magdalene being one of Christ's disciples, despite not being named in the Holy 12, right? The typical 12 disciples. But Salome was another one who was very close to Christ and who followed Christ as closely as the male disciples that are typically referenced in the scriptures. So she is an important character. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, though. But you can see here in the footnote in 61:2, it says, Salome in the New Testament, Salome appears only in Mark, and that's in chapter 15, verse 40, and chapter 16, verse 1. Elsewhere in early Christian literature, she is to be found in the infancy gospel of James, the mystical gospel of Mark, the gospel of the Egyptians, as well as several Gnostic works like the Pista Sophia, the first apocalypse of James, and the Manichaean Psalm book. Okay. I like this too here where it says as a stranger, what we were just talking about. The meaning of the Coptic is unclear. So this text was originally found in the Coptic translation. It could also mean as someone special, right? So this could be her saying, hey, who are you? Because you are not like anyone I've ever met. You are someone special. Now, there was a footnote that mentioned the couch down here. Sometimes it is translated as bed. Okay. I don't think that's really relevant. I don't think that he was, in Salome's bed necessarily, but he was reclining with her. And when we read the story of the Last Supper, Christ was reclining with his disciples, meaning they were relaxed, they were comfortable. It was like hanging out with friends, right? They were close to one another. He felt comfortable enough to be able to recline with them. So that's the indication that we're getting here. And he's just finished telling her, two friends will be together hanging out on a couch, and one will die and one will live. So she responds with, well, who are you? Because here you are on my couch and you've shared a meal with me, which was considered a big deal, right? That was one of the reasons why the Pharisees had such a problem with Christ eating with sinners, eating with the tax collectors and things like that, because sharing a meal with someone was intimate. It was significant. It had a great amount of meaning. And we're kind of going to revisit that again when we talk a little bit about this, the parable of the master who was inviting people to his dinner and no one is coming, right? So he's inviting them into an intimate gathering, and they're choosing not to accept his invitation. Okay, so Jesus responds to her, I am the one who comes from what is whole. So right there, he's referring to a singular, a monadic kind of thing, a wholeness, a oneness, a unity. And he was granted from the things of his Father. Now, when Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, and he kind of admonishes them and tells them, you are not from the same Father. They get a little irate with him on that. So it's important to pay attention to what he's saying about his Father here. His Father is someone who is whole. And when the Pharisees say, well, we worship our, Abraham's God, that's our Father. And Jesus kind of explains to them, that's not the same one I'm worshiping here. Okay. Not necessarily that Abraham was worshiping the wrong one, but that the people that claimed to be worshiping Abraham's God were not worshiping the correct one. Now, mind you, that's not entirely clear. I don't feel like Jesus in that text is necessarily calling Abraham out for being wrong, but he's definitely calling out the Pharisees in that instance. Now, the thing that I find interesting, though, is Christ says to Salome, he is her disciple. I am your disciple. Now, we know that Christ had disciples that followed him, that he taught. But what is discipleship? Discipleship is a partnership in which we learn from one another, we help each other, we support each other, kind of like what we have here, right? There's a give and take in our little community where you learn from me, I learn from you, we help each other out, right? We are doing life together. And I know I use that a lot, but I really feel like that is the single most important aspect of this group, is to do life together. When we have ups, we do life together. When we have downs, we do life together. This is a family, right? And the word disciple is also from the same root from which we get discipline. And what is discipline? Typically, when we hear the word discipline, it usually kind of comes with a negative connotation. you know, it's like pain follows it or discomfort follows it, right? We don't really want to be disciplined. But on the flip side of that, discipline can be self-inflicted, and it can be it can accompany determination, it can accompany resolve, it can be something that pushes us further, that improves us, right? So being a disciple and being disciplined kind of go hand in hand. And that's why we do our very best to maintain this group meeting at least once a week. We may not always meet on the same day, but I want to make sure that we are staying accountable to one another, that we are continuing to grow in our faith walk, whatever that looks like for all of us. It's not about so much that you are walking the same walk that I am walking, but that we are walking together moving forward. Um, I wouldn't, I couldn't do this without you guys. Nor would I want to do this without you guys, So I am kind of a stickler for, if you're able to, please show up. Even if it's in the replay, even if you have to watch it later. And then just checking in on you just to make sure that you are on the journey forward. And if you fall back a few steps, well, then one of us is going to be here to pick you up. And I will do my level best to be that one every time if I am able, come hell or high water, because this group is so important. To be able to find community with other people who are as invested in their spiritual journey is a rare thing, and I cherish this group deeply. You guys are my bread and butter, okay? Like I love you so much, and I want to see you flourish. Even though sometimes we don't find all the answers to the questions that we have, I do feel like we get closer and closer and closer every time. And
Hey, hey, Jess,
yes.
I was going to say, I completely agree. So far, I mean, I think this is my third time I've attended now. I've gotten an awful lot of it, and since attending, I've been thinking a great deal more about the bigger questions and what have you. And I was going to actually mention very quickly, and I tried to earlier, but I was going to type it and I couldn't type fast enough. But just going back to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
Mhm.
I had a kind of a belief or an idea of it possibly being symbolic of human beings becoming self-aware,
Mm,
and in doing so, obviously that's obviously when we talk about suffering in the animal kingdom, typically it's animals that are not self-aware don't suffer as much as animals that do. So, for instance, an animal that isn't self-aware can never ask the question, "Why am I in pain?"
mm,
Whereas where a creature that is self-aware can, and that's where the suffering comes from. It's the realization that something unjust is happening. So I didn't always think, but I came to the idea that I wondered whether or not the story of eating from the tree of knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of um, good and evil, was symbolic of that when human beings became self-aware. Because I mean, if we're not to if we're to play on the idea that science and religion aren't mutually exclusive, then that would tie in to some extent with the early human beings, not necessarily being um, not necessarily being as evolved as we are now. I know that's a touchy subject because it's then playing with the idea that obviously the theory of evolution and creation in some respect marry, that was just an idea I had anyway. I don't know how you feel about that.
So I actually think that I think that's a reasonable observation. I mean, when remember when God made Adam, he slept first before he breathed life into his lungs. And that word sleep, we've kind of talked about this before in some of our other studies, but that word sleep is often used in relation to death. It's as if someone who is dead, either in the physical sense, like what we are used to, or even in a spiritual sense, kind of just being um, unaware of their spiritual selves. It's usually a sleep or a death, right? Um, when mankind ate from that tree, their eyes were opened and they could see that they were naked. They could see that, oh, this is this is more than, just walking along in the garden, right? And we talked, I believe it was last week, where we talked a little bit about what that meant for Adam to know his wife. That was an intimate encounter with his wife, right? So this, if you think about it, and I don't want to be too graphic on here, but if you think about the union of a male and a female, that can very much be a kind of an awakening experience to the realization that, oh, there is more than just me in the world. Now I have this connection with this other person. And now I realize that there are parts of me that maybe I feel are imperfect, or need to change, or whatever, to be able to make this other person happy. And then you kind of open up this whole new can of worms, where before you just kind of lived in your own little bubble, in your own little world, and you didn't really have anyone else to worry about. And I believe it's Paul that says that, it's better for a man to not be married so that he can focus on his spiritual development. Because if not, then he's having to worry about his wife too, or his children as well. And it's kind of diminishing or taking away from his spiritual pursuits. And there's a reason for that, because when you bring physical intimacy in, and now you have this connection with another human being that you may have only had with like your mother, but in a different sense, that deep human connection, then it kind of distorts your reality. It changes your um, it changes your um the importance of things. The I'm sorry, I'm losing words tonight. Priorities. Changes your priorities, because now you're looking out for someone else, right? So now Adam and Eve are in the garden. They realize, oh, well, now we are connected, we are aware, we see what's going on in our world. And I don't necessarily think that the concept that you're referring to takes away from the Gnostic concept of this being an opportunity for awakening of mankind. Now, were they then aware of the evil that was in the world? Yes, but they were also aware then of the good that was within them, and then they had a choice. So personally, I don't disagree with you, and I think that kind of reinforces the Gnostic belief, if that makes sense. Now, when we talk about being whole, again, the difference between the word whole and the word unwavering feels very much like a single-mindedness. Now, despite being in the physical realm, despite having, spouses, children, work responsibilities, all of these things that kind of detract from our spiritual walk, or can detract from our spiritual walk, I should say. Um, Despite all of that, I think we can still be whole, but it starts in the mind. If we are double-minded, and Katie, you and I talked about this earlier, there's a danger to being double-minded. And I am I am a Libra sun and Aquarius rising. So I have a little bit of that double-mindedness. John, you can probably relate a little bit as a Gemini too, having this kind of almost like a dualistic nature, um, but in a way that you're always seeking to maintain balance. At least I am always seeking to maintain balance between um, a part of me that is kind of fiery and um, a little bit on the, I guess, the dark side, and then a part of me that is low and light and easygoing and a little bit more on the light side, on the pleasant side. Um, and this can, it can feel like what Christ says, a ship tossed upon the ocean. It can feel very much like a roller coaster, like a back and forth. So I've had to put in a lot of extra work to not not kill the dark side, so to speak, but assimilate it. Realize that I don't have to vacillate between extremes. I can walk the middle. And I will not say that that's easy, hardly. Um, but I have found that maintaining the middle ground, not being overly emotional to the left or to the right, not being overly connected to one side or the other, has made it easier to feel full of light, right? But when I am divided or when I am double minded, I can very easily kind of go to battle with myself. So I could see where this would be sort of that filled with darkness. Think about it. Um, the expression, you cannot serve two masters. You either love the one and hate the other, despise the one and love the other, right? This idea is immediately followed with man cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon was the deity commonly associated with money. But now we often take that to mean man cannot serve God or money. But who was Mammon? Mammon was actually a deity that was enamored with money to the point where his greed got the better of him. He was always seeking to obtain more, right? It's not necessarily that the money is the root of all evil, right? But it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And this was what Mammon was guilty of. He was so in love with money that he wanted to um, consume as much as possible. So if we have this deep and abiding love for God, but then at the same time we're also just trying really hard to get all the money because we love the money, not because we're going to use it for something good or give it back or whatever, just for the sake of being greedy, then we can't possibly be fully focused on our walk with God and also focus on our pursuit of money. So I feel like that's a really good example of this idea of being double minded. Now, again, that doesn't make money evil. And I think a lot of people really struggle with this idea and struggle themselves into poverty because of it. But when you are walking in alignment with God and you are doing what God has called you to do, He is going to provide for you. I mean, Christ even says that. He says, look at the flowers of the field. Even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like these flowers, and these flowers are just going to wither and die. How much more will God provide for you? The birds, they don't worry about what they're going to eat. How much more is God going to provide for you? Right? That's that is alluding to that double-mindedness. Don't worry about what you need. Don't worry about, are you going to have enough money? Are you going to have enough food? Are you going to have the right clothes to wear? Don't worry about those things. Keep your mind focused on the kingdom and that which belongs to the kingdom. So if you're doing the work to help other people according to what God has set for you to do in your path, then he's going to provide for all of your needs. Now, if you are not living according to your purpose, you might have a bit more of a challenge. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be, completely poverty stricken, but it may be more of a challenge if you're not living according to your true purpose. And everyone's purpose is different. Everyone's purpose is unique. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, actually, about being part of the body and how each part has a different function. But I did want to point out before we move on that the Coptic text, instead of the word whole, reads desolate. Now, desolate is a whole other can of worms. And I want to run a quick search. Let me do that on my laptop really quickly, because I know that a lot of the words that we use here in the 21st century are descended from, several hundred years ago, and they didn't originally mean what they mean today. So I just want to clarify. Lay waste, ruin, render a region or place lonely by depopulation or devastation. So this is not a super pleasant thing here. Disconsolate, miserable, overwhelmed with grief, deprived of comfort, without companions, solitary, lonely. Aha, there we go. Solitary, leave alone, desert, completely deserted, make lonely or alone. So again, this is very much a singleness, a single-mindedness. Does this mean that you have to be physically single? No. No, I don't think that's what that means. It would be easier for you to have this single-mindedness if you do not have someone else to worry about, but it it means in your mind, who are you listening to? Do you have just one voice guiding you and you're following that voice, or do you have, an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other? You know, work on keeping your mind single. So let's look at some of these things here and see if we can dig a little bit deeper. So we're going to be talking about the, two on the couch and one dies and one lives. Okay. Matthew 24:40 through 41. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Luke 17:34 through 35. I tell you, in that night there shall be two men in one bed, the one shall be taken, and the other shall be left. Two women shall be grinding together, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two men shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, Where, Lord? And he said unto them, Wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. So we looked at that last part last week. So it's interesting that at the end of all of that, he says, where the body is. Okay. Brings us back to this idea of, kind of like this mind over matter that we've been talking about. So from the Q gospel, remember, this is a theoretical gospel. We don't have any surviving copies of this text. We've only gotten what we can piece together from other texts. Okay. I tell you, on that night, there will be two in one bed. One will be taken and the other left. There will be two women grinding meal together. One will be taken and the other left. So a lot of people refer to this as being like the rapture event. The Left Behind series, right? The movies that show, people just going about their day-to-day lives, and then suddenly, their loved ones or their coworkers just disappear, and they can't figure out what's going on. I wonder if this is deeper than that. What if this is um a splitting up of the mind into a singularity, kind of eliminating um, the double-mindedness, so to speak. The reason that I propose this is, Christ said that he came to bring a sword, right? And the sword will divide. What's it dividing, right? Could this be that there will come a point where you will no longer need that part of you that is always focused on, well, I need to eat, I need to go make a living to survive. What if that part is no longer necessary? Just a theory. But I feel like this last little bit here of Luke 17 kind of alludes to that a little bit, right? Wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. Again, sometimes it is translated as vultures instead of eagles. And vultures being carrion birds, we know that they are going to be devouring the flesh, the material. Okay, just a theory. Okay, let's look at Matthew 11:27. Do you guys have any observations, any thoughts you'd like to share before we move on? Okay. So the next part that we're going to look at here is, I am the one who comes from what is whole. I was granted from the things of my Father. We're going to start in Matthew 11:27. All things are delivered unto me of my Father, and no man knoweth the Son but the Father. Neither knoweth any man the Father save the Son, and he to whomsoever the Son will reveal him. Okay, we've talked about this many, many, many times, that Christ calls himself the Son of Man. He does not even say, I am God. And he doesn't directly say, I am the Son of God. He implies it, but he doesn't say it outright. Okay. Um, is it only him that he is referring to? So is he just referring to himself as the Son, or is he referring to anyone who is truly descendant from / connected to the divinity of God? I don't necessarily need an answer unless you would like to answer, but just throwing that out there. Okay. No man knoweth the Son but the Father, neither knoweth any man the Father save the Son. Well, that brings to mind the verse that says that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Right? So God knows things about us that no one else knows. And if we are connected to God, we know things about God that not everyone's going to know either. Not that no one else knows it, but the relationship, let's say the relationship that you have with your parent. There's probably a lot of things that only your parent knows. This is commonly the mom, right? The mom usually just knows things about her children that other people don't know. Now, that's not to say that that's always true, but I'm just using like from my own experience, even my own mother and I, we have not always been on the best of terms, but she does know me well. It's frightful sometimes how well she knows me. But then likewise, I know her very well too. Again, despite our differences, um, I know my mother, and my mother knows me. Well, um, thankfully, I have been blessed with a wonderful relationship with my father, and my father is the same way. He knows me well, and I know him well. We get each other's jokes. And that's saying something because we both have a strange sense of humor. But but I think that a parent has a unique love for their child, and the child has a unique connection to their parent. And it may not always be the case here in the physical realm, but I think it's most certainly always the case in the spiritual realm. I think that the divine knows us deeply and truthfully. If we really dig deep inside ourselves, we know the divine better than we realize. That's why we find resonance in the things of the spirit. That's why we connect so deeply to these truths that we may not fully understand. We may not even be able to express them in words, but our hearts understand. John 3:35. The Father loveth the Son and hath given all things into his hand. Such a beautiful thing. Um, Brings to mind the verse where um, it says that, would God, or would a loving father give his son a stone to eat instead of bread? No, of course not. How much more does your Father in heaven love you and want to give you good gifts? Right? We are all sons and daughters, but think about it, even in terms of earthly relationships with parents, sometimes children end up estranged from their parents. Not always because of the parent, sometimes, but um, a truly loving parent will always welcome their child back in, despite how long it's been, right? Kind of like the story of the prodigal son. When the prodigal son returned, the father held a huge banquet, right? Because his son had returned. It didn't matter how long he was gone or what he did with his inheritance. It didn't matter that he squandered everything and came back penniless. His father was thankful to bring him home, right? Our Heavenly Father wants to give us all good things. He doesn't want that we would suffer. Okay. Luke 10:22. All things are delivered to me by my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is but the Father, and who the Father is but the Son, and he to whom the Son will reveal him. So again, we've got in Matthew 11 and in Luke 10, we see Christ also mentioning that people whom Christ reveals the Father to will know the Father. Okay. John 6:37-39. All that the Father giveth me shall come to me, and him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. For I came down from heaven not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that of all which he hath given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. So Christ is not going to turn away anyone who comes to him, right? If you're seeking to know the Father, you will know the Father. And this is that Christ that came from heaven. Remember what I said earlier about Christ being the perfect man, um, the divine reunification of the monad. So in the Gnostic cosmology, the monad splits apart and comes back together. This same thing appears in Kabbalah, right? Splits apart, comes back together. As it comes back together, that is the Christ. The Christ is complemented by Sophia. Okay. This is the reunification. This is the idea of the two shall become one flesh. Okay. Bringing it all back together. Now, this perfect example of oneness comes down from heaven to do the will of the monad or to do the will of God. And what is his will? That everything that he has given to Christ, Christ will lose nothing. Christ as the Son, we as sons and daughters. Do we really lose anything? I know this is kind of a pointed question here, especially knowing what some of you have endured in terms of loss. But have we really lost anything? Have we gained wisdom? Have we gained understanding? Is that which we cannot see anymore actually lost? Katie, you and I talk a lot about the spiritual realm and how we have connections to those who have passed, right? Um, I don't fully understand how that works, but I'm a firm believer in there being much more than meets the eye. That the spiritual realm is ever present and accessible. I've seen it, I've felt it. And Katie, I know you have too. Um, we think of loss in terms of that which is physical. So let's come out of this kind of emotionally charged topic. And forgive me, I don't mean to strike a nerve. If we look at this in terms of um, money, okay, again, coming back to money because I feel like it's easy to illustrate from this perspective. Okay. If we say the car breaks down and we have to go and we have to spend $500 to get it fixed. Um, John, convert that into pounds for me. But you have to spend some money on your car to get it repaired. And it kind of feels like a loss. You don't really want to have to spend that money. And, I feel like we're all in a relatively similar financial situation in terms of um, 500 doesn't feel good to anyone to have to spend on car repairs. But that money is spent. Now the car works. Now you can continue to drive. You can go back and forth to work and make that money back. Eventually, that money does come back. Yes, arigato. Yes. Thank you as you let it go and then it flows back in. But it does, it ebbs and it flows, right? It comes back again every time, right? Did we lose it? No, it just went back into circulation. And I believe very much that that which we are so attached to in the physical, whether it be finances, things, people, anything like that, has just kind of gone back into circulation. Not necessarily that they're gone from us. Um, you guys know that I lost my brother last April, and it hit very, very, very hard, very, very unexpected, and so much going for him. He was a bright light in our family, and he left behind um, a little boy who's now 3. And um, our whole family was devastated because we didn't understand how he could be the one to go. Um, he was the kind of person that would give his own arm to help someone else. He lived his life. Oh, don't be sorry. This gets good. Don't be sorry. It gets good. He lived his life for other people. And I was so angry when he passed away. I was so angry. I couldn't understand why God would take someone so good. But since then, I have learned that it's because now he has the freedom to help everyone. He has the freedom to help multiple people at a time. His story continues to help people. Um, I I can't say what caused it here, or if I upload this video to YouTube, it will be taken down. But I'm sure you guys can figure out over the last couple of years the things that have kind of been forced onto us. Um, our family firmly believes that that's what caused his death. And yes, yes, Katie, exactly. Um, and now his story helps other people from having the same fate happen to them. We've gotten multiple confirmations that he is present, watching over our family. Um, I have had some amazing experiences um, from the spiritual realm. So while it's challenging to adjust to the fact that he is no longer physically here with us, uh, he is doing the work that he was always meant to do in the spiritual realm now. And um, I've lost a lot of family members over the years, most of them to the medical establishment. Unfortunately, I have a strong disdain for allopathic medicine for that reason, even though I used to work in it. But I see them as, maybe they're no longer in pain. You know, I had family members who were living in excruciating pain who are no longer suffering from that anymore. And now they're in a place where um, they can be free from that, or they can help others, or um, be supportive. My stepmom had a really hard time with my brother's death because that was her baby boy, and um, I can't even begin to imagine what that must be like as a parent. But she is frequently reminded that he is still present with her. And does that mean that he will be with us forever? Um, maybe not. Maybe he'll move on when he's all done, what he's come to do. But um, I think that our spirits can transcend our physicality, and even without the loss of the body. What I mean by that is, um, and Katie, you understand this quite well because of the work that we do together, but the the ability to be able to send Reiki to someone, or the ability to receive an emotion code session from you, Katie, like just that exchange of energy transcends space and time. um, whenever I tell you guys that I'm sending you prayers or sending you love or sending you hugs, like I really am sending that to you. And I know I can feel it. I can feel like I'm giving you like a virtual hug. Um, and I know I can feel it when other people send it to me as well. Yes, with all my heart. Absolutely. I just pour it out like it's a waterfall. And it just passes through any distance, it passes through any amount of time. But I can also feel when a family member has something wrong, when something's going on. I can feel that too. So I believe that we have the ability here and now to transcend our body. And what is our body but something that withers over time anyway, right? Wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. It's constantly, from the moment we are born, our cells are experiencing apoptosis, right? They're experiencing cellular death constantly. Our bodies are constantly going through death and rebirth over and over and over again. Within the span of about a year, every single cell in your body has been replaced by a new cell. And this is just the way we were designed, right? Our bodies are temporary, but our spirits are forever. So when we think of loss and of having everything given to us, we really do have everything given to us. It may not seem that way sometimes because we are looking at it from a human perspective. We are looking at it with our physical eyes. But in reality, we are lacking for nothing. Yeah, we should. I'll tell you what, I do talk to myself, honey, and it makes a difference. It does. It makes a difference because um, it I used to be the person that was always complaining about how bad my body hurt. Dealing with a chronic illness since childhood has not been a cakewalk. And I grew up in a home environment that unfortunately had kind of a pessimistic view, um, pervading pretty much everything. And to shift that has been huge, huge for my own well-being. It has changed how I feel based on how I talk to myself. So don't get me wrong, I still get stiff, I still get sore, but speaking to my cells and telling them, like, today's going to be a good day, today we're not going to hurt, today we're going to feel amazing. It makes a difference. It does. And when we realize that we have these kinds of abilities, that we have the power to transcend our own physical limitations, I think this is what Christ was trying to teach his disciples. Now, legally, I cannot say that you have the power to HEAL yourself through prayer, through meditation, through spiritual healing. That's what I got dinged for on the last video that got taken down. But I believe it to be true. I do. I believe that we have the power of life and death in our tongues. Why would I believe any different? Christ said so. And yes, I do believe what he taught. If we have the power to build up and to tear down with our tongues, that's not just what we're saying to everybody else, it's what we're saying to ourselves too, right? John 8:12. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into this text. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up. Okay. So I'm just going to start here from John 8:12 and read a little bit further down. Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. The Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest record of thyself, thy record is not true. Jesus answered and said unto them, Though I bear record of myself, yet my record is true. For I know whence I came and whither I go, but ye cannot tell whence I came and whither I go. Ye judge after the flesh. I judge no man. And yet, if I judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I and the Father that sent me. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one that bear witness of myself, and the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. Then said they unto him, Where is thy Father? Jesus answered, Ye neither know me nor my Father. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also. These words spake Jesus in the treasury as he taught in the temple, and no man laid hands on him, for his hour was not yet come. Then said Jesus again unto them, I go my way, and ye shall seek me, and shall die in your sins. Whither I go, ye cannot come. Then said the Jews, Will he kill himself? Because he saith, Whither I go, ye cannot come. And he said unto them, Ye are from beneath, I am from above. Ye are of this world, I am not of this world. I said therefore unto you that ye shall die in your sins, for if ye believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. Then said they unto him, Who art thou? And Jesus saith unto them, Even the same that I said unto you from the beginning. I have many things to say and to judge of you, but he that sent me is true, and I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him. They understood not that he spake to them of the Father. Then said Jesus unto them, When ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father hath taught me, I speak these things. And he that sent me is with me. The Father hath not left me alone, for I do always those things that please him. As he spake these words, many believed on him. Ooh. So he makes it crystal clear to them that they do not understand who he is. They cannot see it. They cannot understand it. They're calling him a liar. And he's like, You have no ability to call me a liar. I know where I came from. You can't tell. You judge by the physical. I don't. That is profound. He does not just, yeah, Judas said it. That's true. He did. And in the Gospel of Judas, he did say that he knew. It was late in the game. I read it through it the other day, and it was like at first Judas wasn't sure, but then he realized it. John 13:3-4. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God, he riseth from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. That's an interesting statement. His soul couldn't look at him. Yeah. Well, I mean, if we look at someone, I'll give you an example. I find that when I am out and about, if I look at someone, their physical being, and pass judgment on them based on what they're wearing or how they're speaking, how they're walking, how they're behaving, immediately I recognize, oh, I have just passed judgment on that person based on physicality. And I find it more difficult, more challenging to see them from a spiritual perspective if I have passed judgment on them based on their physicality. So trying to, I don't like the word judgment, but I feel like that's the only one that works here. And I don't mean judgment in the sense of like looking down on someone, but I mean judgment in the sense of discernment. Discerning who someone is based on their energy is far more effective for me. And I don't have to be near the person to be able to determine that. But generally speaking, I can feel someone's energy, and that tends to be a truer measure of who they are. Now, it is wise for us to use discernment because there are those in the world that would seek to do us harm. Does that mean that we should do them harm first? No, absolutely not. But it means that we are to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, right? We are supposed to be aware of those that seek to do us harm, but not necessarily, try to hurt them. We have to maintain our innocence and our purity. And we can still look at them with kindness and compassion, but guard ourselves from harm. And we cannot be gullible because, right, the enemy prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he will devour. Right? There are wolves and lions on the path. I mean, we have numerous warnings in scripture about the dangers that are around us. Now, I would caution you to not just look at everything from the perspective that everything's out to get you, Um, always, one of my favorite expressions is hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Because you're ready if the worst should happen, but it's unlikely that it will happen because you are hoping the best, right? You want to hope on people. Um, there was a time where I was quite the misanthropist, where um, I did not trust people because people had hurt me and people had wronged me. And I noticed that over time, that just made me bitter and closed off. And that's not someone I want to be. So Christ getting up from supper and putting aside his garments, girding himself, that is very symbolic. The garments are often the body. You expect the worst, so you're never disappointed. Yeah, well, um, but think about what that did to your worldview, though. Think about how much that limited your potential, right? I mean, I know thinking like that did the same to me. Um, whereas if I hope for the best, but I am prepared for the worst, It's kind of like hoping that the sun is going to shine all day, but bringing an umbrella just in case. You know what I mean? You're prepared if the worst should happen, but you're still looking for the bright side. Um, like we talked about last week, looking for the miracles, expecting miracles. I expect miracles. And to come from a place of being so misanthropic and being so kind of down on the whole world, and also consequently down on myself because of it, um, it's a much better place to be expecting miracles and looking for the joys of life, because I tend to find them a lot more often now. Right? But going back to these garments are usually representative of the physical body. More often than not, when you see the word garments in scripture, it is referring to the things of the flesh. But notice what he did. He girded himself. Katie, do you remember the um, the armor of God? I know we had talked about this quite a bit. Let me pull it up. I'm typing on one thing and doing something on another. That is the downside of having two keyboards in front of me. This comes from, I believe it's Ephesians. Bear with me, it's taking a minute to load. Maybe. I know we have the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes of the gospel of peace. It's taking so long to load. All right. Yeah, Ephesians 6:10-18. Let's look at it here. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Yes, there is evil that exists in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. After you have done everything to stand, stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. So some translations say, gird up your loins with the buckle of truth. Okay, so keeping that in mind, he is making a pointed statement there that he is taking on the truth of who he really is and laying down the limitations of his flesh. Powerful stuff there. Okay, any questions? I know we went kind of long on that one. My apologies for that, but it was a lot. This one's a bit shorter. How are we doing so far, guys? Okay. Verse 62. Jesus said, I disclose my mysteries to those who are worthy of my mysteries. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So we talked about the left hand and the right hand last week. We're going to talk about it again this week. See? All of it ties together. Let's read Matthew 13:10-17 first. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou unto them in parables? He answered and said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for you see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. So, again, we're talking about physical senses, right? Seeing, they do not see, and hearing, they do not hear. Their eyes have closed, their ears are dull of hearing. They have tuned it out. Maybe they're busy with the things of life. Maybe they don't want to hear it. Maybe they just don't care. They're so wrapped up in that which exists here in the physical body. I have needs. I need to eat. I need to sleep. I need to have, a roof over my head and clothes on my back. I need to have physical intimacy. I need to have time with friends. Those don't seem bad necessarily, right? And they're not. But have those kinds of pursuits turned your eyes away from the kingdom? Have they deafened you to the needs of other people? Because the whole of the law is summed up in two commands, right? Love God and love others. So how do we love God? Well, we follow his commands to love others. It's pretty simple. Now, the Pharisees, my apologies, apparently my youngest is a little bit hot. She's a little upset. But the Pharisees wanted to heap laws on people's heads. And Christ admonished them for this because he said basically it was making it impossible for people to come to God. They didn't think it was even remotely possible. When you have 613 commandments, yes, that is how many commandments were given. Okay. The book of Leviticus details all of that. Exodus 20 is the 10 commandments. But Leviticus gives us all 613 commandments. Yeah, I know, surprising, right? Things like you can't wear clothing made of two different fabrics, different kinds of foods you can eat or cannot eat, the things you cannot touch, how you should wash before dinner, all sorts of things. Yeah. And these laws were given by God as a means to protect his people from harm. But instead, the Pharisees made it so that you have to follow these laws in such and such a way and do this and do that, right? when the Pharisees come to Jesus and they say, hey, why are your disciples picking grain and eating it on the Sabbath day? That's doing work. They're not allowed to do that. And Christ is like, I'm healing on the Sabbath day. And they're like, oh, no, that's terrible. That's terrible. And he admonishes them for that too. That's stupid thinking. Oh, it's the Sabbath day. You can't heal someone? That's preposterous. And rightfully, I'm pretty sure that Christ was in the right on that one. That's not work. That's doing God's will. So when someone becomes so fixated on doing everything right, yeah, people don't get hurt on the Sabbath, right? um, but when someone gets so fixated on, am I doing everything right? It's no longer about truly seeking the kingdom as it is now solely based on works. Have I checked all the boxes? And what kind of relationship with God is that? Do you want your relationship with the Almighty to be about checking boxes? That's silly. That is silly. Okay. it no. It's a matter of the heart. Again, I will say it. Man looks at the outward appearance. The Lord looks at the heart. He wants to know that your heart is fully invested. You might drop the ball. Does that mean just throw in the towel? Just give up? Yesterday, my son had a baseball game and there was an error on the field. Somebody bobbled the ball and they didn't just stop playing, walk off the field. Oh, we're done. Guess we lost. No, they kept going, right? And it was a nail-biting game. They were down by 1 point into extra innings. They finally tied it up right in the 6th inning, went into extra innings, and ultimately won the game. But had they just given up on that bobble, for heaven's sakes, they never would have had that victory. That's what faith is. But the Pharisees made it so legalistic that it was impossible for people to even want to do anything. They didn't think they'd ever get it right. And that's what Christ means. He's saying, look, you're missing the needs of other people. You're missing the will of God because you're so worried about the fleshly things. Dotting every I and crossing every T isn't what's going to get you into heaven, right? Should your faith be accompanied by works? Absolutely. You should be doing God's will. But it shouldn't only be about what you're doing right or what you're not doing right. It's a matter of the heart. Mark 4:10 through 12, a little bit shorter version, same concept. And when he was alone, they that were about him with the 12 asked of him the parable. And he said unto them, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. But unto them that are without, all these things are done in parables, that seeing they may see and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand, lest at any time they should be converted and their sins should be forgiven them. Now we have a little bit of additional information. Much shorter passage, but much more information here. Because even though they are seeing and they're not really perceiving it, and even though they are hearing and not really understanding it, at any time that could change. Suddenly they could wake up. And think about it. Were you always on this path? Or one day did you wake up? One day did you say, oh, wait a minute, that's not what that means. wait a minute, this is far more important than I realized. Wait a minute, that's not significant, right? I'm going down the wrong road. Let me correct my course. Perhaps the parables were a means of compassion because think about it. Yes, stages and phases, exactly. Because think about it. If you were given to understand all of these things and pile on the legalistic viewpoint on top of that, it might be overwhelming for some people. But if you get it in little drips and drabs, little bits and pieces, kind of like that idea about how when you were new in the faith, you drank milk like a baby, but as you grew, you began to eat meat, right? Because you were able to digest something more substantial. These parables can teach you something on a fundamental level, but they can also go much deeper and then even deeper still and even deeper still. It's kind of like you watch a movie and you're like, wait a minute, I don't remember that from the last time I watched the movie. And then you watch it again and you're like, oh, that's new. You guys are probably gonna laugh at me, but one of my favorite movies is Pink Floyd's The Wall. I've seen that movie over 200 times. I know it's ridiculous, but I love that movie, and I love it because it was one of my, yeah, that's another one of my favorites. I haven't seen that one 200 times, but I've seen The Labyrinth a lot. But very much true. Yes, the labyrinth is, you're evolving, and remember the picture of the Celtic labyrinth that I sent to you. It's almost kind of like this spiral or this vortex kind of shape to it, right? The spiral of growth. I have a book called The Mystic Spiral. That's pretty amazing. But anyway, the movie, I even seeing it 200 times, every single time I watched it, I saw something that I didn't see before. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the movie so much, is because it was always new to me. There was always something new. And how often do we read through scripture and we see the same thing? There's always, oh, I didn't see that before. Or, oh, that's interesting how they worded that. I didn't catch that last time. Right? We're always growing and always evolving. But sometimes we got to get it on the little milk level first. Yes, with new eyes and new ears, exactly. We got to get it on the base level first, and then we can build upon that, right? The house built on a firm foundation stands through the storm. If we just built it on sand, it's gonna float away. But we build our foundation and we make it strong, and then we grow and we build upon that. And soon we have a very firm structure that cannot be moved. So maybe the parables weren't leaving people out so much as it was an act of compassion and giving them building blocks one at a time. Right? Because it seems kind of harsh the way that he says it at first. He's kind of like, you know, it's given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. That's like, oh, ouch. I feel sorry for those people. What are they going to do? It's those who have will get more and more and more. The deeper they dig, the more they will find, right? If they choose not to dig, that's their choice. They can make that choice. They're allowed to make that choice. They may not see what you see. And I think at least for me personally, and this could be different for everyone, but um when I was what I like to call a Bible thumper, I used to beat people over the head with scripture. Like, no, you gotta listen. And I found that it was a deterrent. It pushed people away. But when I learned to look at them from a place of compassion and just say, hey, you know what? They're on whatever journey they're on, and I'm on this journey, and it's okay for them to be where they are. That was so freeing, not just to me, but to them as well, because then they didn't have the pressure of having to try to live up to Jessica's standards. God forbid, heaven's sakes. Can you imagine? Like, I was ridiculous. Seriously. And I can't blame people that are in that spot either, because I understand what it was like to, have this love for God and see, you know, the potential horrors coming ahead, for someone who didn't know. And I just wanted to help all the people and save all the people. But that's not my job. My job is to share the good news. And what is that? It's not, oh, if you don't accept this gospel, you're going to hell. That's not really good news. The good news is it's available when you're ready to get it. That's the good news. It's here, should you seek it. Yeah, I still think the 144,000 has something to do with the amount of petals on the crown chakra, but we'll talk about that another day. I get a little bit metaphysical with this sometimes, um but yeah, the 144,000 is supposed to be representative of 12,000 each from the 12 tribes of Israel. And maybe that's all that's left to truly understand. There have been people that have postulated that the 144,000 is the amount of light workers that are doing God's work, not necessarily just for those that are, yeah. I believe so. There's a lot of theories on the 144,000. I encourage you to look into that. Look into that from a Christian perspective, look into it from a metaphysical perspective. The 144,000 is fascinating. I found it particularly fascinating when I got into sacred geometry. The video that I shared with you, it was a while back. I'd have to go through and find it again, but I believe you watched it, or at least part of it. But he mentions 144,000 in that, and that was a fascinating discussion. Highly recommend it. But yeah, I could go down a long tangent with that, and I'm not going to do that tonight. But yes, look into that. If you want that video, I will gladly send that over to you. I know, and I'm trying to be mindful of the time, because I know John is 5 hours ahead of us. So I'm trying to be mindful of that, even though it's Friday. I'm sure he's probably had a long day. So, okay, Luke 8, verses 9 through 15. And his disciples asked him, saying, what might this parable be? And he said unto you, it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to others in parables, that seeing they might not see, and hearing they might not understand. Now, the parable is this: the seed is the word of God. Those by the wayside are they that hear. Then cometh the devil, and taketh away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. They on the rock are they which, when they hear, receive the word with joy, and these have no root, which for a while believe, and in time of temptation fall away. And that which fell among thorns are they which, when they have heard, go forth and are choked with cares and riches and pleasures of this life. Bam. And bring no fruit to perfection. But that on the good ground are they which, in an honest and good heart, having heard the word, keep it, and bring forth fruit with patience. This is what I'm talking about. This is where we dig deep. We dig our roots in. We find the hidden gems that are there. They're there to find if we're looking for them. Think about it. You have eyes to see, but you don't see. That doesn't make any sense. Or does it? You have eyes to see, but you're not paying attention. You know what I mean? You're not truly looking for the deeper meaning. And think about it, once you find it, what was I saying earlier about how liberating it was to come to a place where I could just lovingly accept someone wherever they were in their journey instead of beating them over the head with what I thought was right. This is fruit. Yeah, exactly. You've heard this a lot. You know this well, right? God does speak if you are listening. The whole spiritual realm speaks if you are listening. And there are some who I would venture to say might be terrified if that happened. So maybe it's good for them to get it in little bite-sized pieces instead of kind of, full tilt, right? They might be like, oh my gosh. Can you imagine? So you want to make sure that you have fertile ground, right? Fertile ground is important. How do we have fertile ground? Well, we are receptive. It's kind of like, I use this one a lot, but the farmer who prepared his fields for rain. He asked for rain, and then he went out and made sure that his fields were ready to receive the rain so that his crops would grow. This was after years of drought. Okay. Yeah. So if you are preparing your mind to receive whatever God has for you without any kind of predetermined notions, without any other predefined judgments. You're fine right here. You can sit. You are more likely to receive it exactly as it is. Now, if you put some kind of value onto it or some kind of judgment to it ahead of time, you're going to be limited in what you get, right? Caleb has joined us, by the way. He doesn't like being on camera, though. I don't blame him. He likes to not put himself out there. Anyway, if you are expecting, as Katie said, hey, if you're expecting to receive something specific, you may miss something else, right? So you want to have an open mind, not so open that your brains fall out, but, but have an open mind to where you can receive that which you seek.
It works the same for people.
You got to speak up.
It works the same for people. If you expect things from others all the time, but you don't allow them to
Come as they are.
that and use whatever preconceived abilities that they have as no, not, sorry, not as, but like to do things that their strengths allow them to be good at, instead of expecting the same thing from one person or expecting the same thing from everybody. Allow them to use their abilities to excel in what they're strong in, and also let them come as they are.
Yeah.
Unless they're buttheads.
Well, even the buttheads, we have to be willing to bring them as they are too, right? So hopefully you guys could hear him. Basically, he was saying to be able to accept people just as they are and allow them to use their unique abilities that they have been given instead of kind of painting everyone with a broad brush. Does that sound about right? Yeah. Because people will surprise you, right? They do every time. People surprise you. This kid is always surprising to me in the best of ways. I'm gonna try to move the mic a little bit closer so that if he has anything else to say, you guys can hear him. Okay, let's look at Matthew 6 verses 1 through 4. And like I said, if you guys have anything to add at any time you want to interrupt, just go ahead and interrupt. I don't take offense to it at all. I know that I'm like talking a mile a minute. In this context, yes.
Oh, okay.
Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise, ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily, I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret. And thy Father, which seeth in secret himself, shall reward thee openly. So we talked about the left versus the right last week. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that in just a minute. So just
As
kind
in
of
left wing and
pin
right
that.
wing, or left hand and right hand?
Well, yes, left wing and right wing too. Yeah, we're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. Okay. But so the alms, this is giving to people, right? Charity. Okay. Interestingly, 1 Corinthians 13, and usually it says love throughout that whole passage. Love bears all things, hopes all things, believes all things, love never fails, that kind of thing. Keeps no records of wrongs. I love you too, buddy. All of that. The word in the 1611 King James is not love at all, but charity. And so charity keeps no records of wrongs. Charity believes all things, hopes all things, and it never fails, right? The alms are helping people out who are less fortunate than you. So typically that meant giving financially. But this was basically Christ saying, hey, don't go walking around the streets blowing the horn, telling everybody, hey, I'm giving this guy $1. Hey, I'm giving that guy $1. You know, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Interesting choice of words there. That was actually one of the reasons that I was really turned off by the church that we used to go to. We were members there for 10 years, and I was really disappointed that they were doing that, because it was just an icky kind of feeling. I understand spurring others on to do good works, but I think that there are other ways to do that instead of tooting your own horn in what you're giving to others. I prefer to keep that to myself. But this idea of don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing made me think of 1 Corinthians 12, 22, or 12, yeah, I'm sorry, 12, 12 through 22. For as the body is one and hath many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit are we all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, and have been all made to drink into one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear shall say, because I am not the eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where were the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where were the smelling? But now hath God set the members, every one of them, in the body as it hath pleased him. And if they were all one member, where were the body? But now are they many members, yet but one body. And the eye cannot say unto the hand, I have no need of thee, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Nay, much more those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary. Okay, so now we kind of have this idea of the collective church. Okay, so this body is representative of the corporate body of believers. That is interesting. Are you referring to the Gnostic cosmology with that, Katie, with regards to the aeons? Okay, I thought so. So yes, so basically, as the aeons were created, they were created as kind of specific aspects of the Godhead, right? And we can see that illustrated in the Kabbalistic tree of life. Okay, so this is the tree of life, and basically the monad comes down and splits off into wisdom and understanding, and then it splits further down into mercy and severity, victory and splendor. And then you have this kind of central pathway, right? There's actually a Sephiroth missing here. It's not depicted in all images of the Kabbalistic tree of life, but there's also one called Da'at, or like the soul. And that is supposed to be representative of Christ. But basically, like this middle path is not too far to the left or to the right, but all of these individual circles, or these sephirot, are supposed to be aspects of the divine creator, broken out into many different things. And this is why, so in Hinduism, for example, Hinduism, a lot of people believe that that is a polytheistic religion, but that's not true. It is a monotheistic religion. It's just that the deities that exist in Hinduism are personifications of attributes of God, or Brahma. Okay. Even the Trinity, even Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are all aspects of the divine oneness. Okay, so you're seeing that a lot in Gnostic cosmology. You even see that in the Christian concept of the Trinity as well. Okay, this is God splitting himself off in a million different directions and then bringing it all back together. There's no piece that's any less a piece of God than the other, right? Just like in the idea of the corporate body, there's no one piece that's more important or less important. If everything was an eye, then how could anything hear? If everything was an ear, how could anything smell, right? All of the pieces are important. All of the pieces are necessary, right? So we have this kind of left hand, right hand thing as part of these members of the body. And then we also have this other kind of more esoteric meaning of the left hand and the right hand path, right? The mercy and severity, as they are commonly called, the pillar of Yakin on the right hand side, which is what the J represents. That is the pillar of mercy. The pillar of Boaz on the left hand side is the pillar of severity. Notice that one is light, one is dark, but it is not light and dark, meaning like good versus evil necessarily. It could be, that could be a way to look at it. But this is showing the two distinct natures. Now, if we look at these things, is understanding less important than wisdom? I would venture to say no. Wisdom is good. Understanding is also good, right? When we listen to people, we seek to understand them. At least I would hope so. What about mercy versus severity? Generally speaking, we would think mercy would be better than severity. But sometimes severity is necessary to teach a lesson. Sometimes we grow better or more through severity, through times of hardship and struggle. Right? Victory and splendor, both of those sound pretty nice. Sometimes splendor is also interpreted as like glory. So one has victory and one has glory. Glory doesn't really seem like a bad thing necessarily, unless you could attribute it to pride. Right? So we can't just look at these in terms of black and white, right and wrong, good and evil. We have to look at this in terms of the corporate body, the whole thing. But what's he saying? Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Don't make it a big deal. If you give to someone, you give to someone, and that's it. You don't hold on to that. You don't share it with the other parts of the body, whether it's in corporate worship or whether it's even within your own body. You know, you give with your left hand, don't worry about your right hand, right? Vice versa. But I do think that it's worth noting to point out the significance of the left hand and the right hand in an esoteric sense, because we know that the scriptures were rewritten in more modern times to contain esoteric wisdom. So I don't want to leave that out. Okay. Do your own digging on that. But for the sake of this particular passage, we don't make a big deal out of it. We just do good for others. Okay.
Hey Jess,
Yes.
I have a. Do you know I'm in the pitch black at the moment. I'm just leaving my friend's house and I've just got in my car. So I'm
Okay.
But anyway, I was going to say I've got a good example of that as well. Years and years ago, I was walking home. I wasn't doing very well financially at the time. I was attending church and what have you, and I dropped Jess off at her mother's, and this was before I had a driver's license, so I didn't have the money for the bus fare home. So I walked. It was about 3 miles, and I walked back home, and I was getting quite hungry, and it was like a couple of days till payday, I think, and I stopped off at in England. We have like the fish and chip shop, which I guess like chips are like, I know like potato chips are different in America, but it's the equivalent of fries, I guess, when we say chips. So literally, I bought a bag of chips, and I think I had like just literally pennies to my name, and I had enough to buy a bag of chips. And I thought that's cool, that's cool. I'll deal with tomorrow when it comes, and I didn't have to worry about Jess because she was at her mum's for a couple of days, so you can imagine I was quite poor. And anyway, I got out and there's a homeless guy and he asked me if I had any change. And I said I didn't, but I felt sorry for him. So I sat down and started sharing my chips with him.
Oh.
And we had about half each. And so I got up afterwards, I said goodbye to him, and I was walking home. And I started thinking about it. And I thought, I felt really good. This is what I was going through my mind. I was thinking to myself, I feel so good for doing that. And then I didn't leave it there. I started running with the idea and thinking, do you know what? When I get home, I'm going to get on the internet and put something really profound about I've just done. Okay. And as soon as I had that thought, I choked on a chip, almost, almost, almost choked to death. And in some strange way, I can't help it. That was God thinking, listen, wind your neck in a bit. Which I thought was quite a good example of that. It's you definitely you definitely got to be careful. I think when you're not to hold yourself on a pedestal or anything when you are committing acts of kindness, I guess. But
Yes. Yes, very true. And I struggle with that oftentimes within this study because I know that there are times when I'll use experiences to illustrate a point, and I never want it to be like I'm tooting my own horn. So I'm always like nervous to share things because I teach best through experiential kinds of things. I can share, oh, I have this story. Stories tend to illustrate a point well, but at the same time, like I don't want to like you said, put myself on a pedestal. So it's such a fine line to walk. But I love the story that you have just shared. So thank you for illustrating that point, because that is how it works sometimes.
Oh, definitely. And it was as clear as day of the error I'd made, just in the immediate thought I had after that action as well. There was no doubt that's exactly what the lesson was for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's good that you got that lesson though. Thankfully
Yeah,
you survived it. But wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that though. But that is very true. Yeah, we tend to get so full of ourselves, and I don't necessarily think that it comes from a bad place, you know. I don't think that it's so much arrogance. It's just um I think
it,
because we feel so good, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that can be dangerous.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think it's the I guess the danger of glorifying what you're doing or your actions on a kind of an individual level is that you're losing focus on the point of it in the first place. I guess.
Yes.
I guess would be the thing to come away with. But
Yes.
yes, after choking on a chip, definitely my thoughts came back into sharp focus.
Well, and so that is this the splendor Sephiroth, right? Or the glory Sephiroth, this orange one here is like, don't get wrapped up in the glory or the pride of it. But that's a fleshly response, right?
The truth was revealed to me in a hot potato.
There you go. And see, sometimes the flesh is what needs tempering, right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely.
Well, that just goes to show that sometimes our stories are just best left to us. You know, sometimes it's okay to just kind of like sit in that for a minute and be thankful for having the opportunity to do a good thing for someone else, but not let it appeal to our ego and make us prideful, right?
Definitely, and there's reward in there's a different kind of reward in that as well because the moment becomes precious. You
Yes.
know, when it's not something which is held aloft, you know, for everybody to see, it becomes precious. I guess there are times where it would be useful to share it with others in terms of trying to inspire or something. But my motivation at the time was certainly not to inspire; it was to let everybody know what a lovely person I was.
Well, and you know, and that's exactly what I was talking about earlier with regards to the church that we had been members of. You know, I as a life group leader within the church, I had had several people come to me and say, "Hey, we don't really think that what they're doing with this is right," because what they were doing basically was taking a video camera and going up to people and giving them money or giving them a gift card or something with a camera in their face
Uh-huh.
and making sure that, you know, it was all on display. And I was in agreement with a lot of the people that came to me. So I took it to the leadership and I brought this specific verse up, Matthew 6, 1 through 4, you know, don't, you know, do your giving in secret, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And they explained to me that, well, they were using that as a way to spur others to do good works.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like there were other ways to do that.
and and I guess a level back a level on top of that is regardless of whether or not those reasons were genuine or not. The problem with that though is regardless of the how genuine that statement was, the problem is we live in such a cynical world and a world will absolutely jump at the opportunity to criticize and be cynical of, and that's just, I mean, that would be an easy card to play when somebody's publicly broadcasting, great charity and that sort of thing. I think so yeah, it opens up that whole other avenue of kind of negative thought.
I agree. And at one point, um, we had become the subject of that. And I actually had someone come to me and say, "Hey, we would love to walk up to you and give you a gift card at the grocery store. Will you meet us at the grocery store so that we can film this?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do that." And they asked me why, and I told them why. I just, it didn't feel, um, it felt contrived. It didn't feel genuine, right? So,
Sure.
um, and trust me, I was humble enough, I would have accepted, but but I was also kind of like, I don't know, it was just very off-putting. So then about a week goes by and they did it anyway, but this time without my consent. They just came up to me with the cameras and handed me a gift card. And I was so mortified. They broadcast that everywhere. They put it on the screen in church on Sunday. They put it on the website and on all of their social media. And it was humiliating. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine how many of the other people that they had done that to that also felt humiliated. You know,
Yeah. No. Yeah.
they could have easily given to those people and then afterwards, said, "Hey, this is where we gave the money," but not who they gave it to or put a camera in their face. It just didn't feel right the way they did it. So,
No, no, I can relate to that definitely. I mean, to some extent, I've probably fallen prey to well, obviously I have. I just gave an example, but when I was doing, we did like a couple of charity things and stuff, and they were quite publicized and stuff. It was to raise money for a charity that dealt with um, um, let me think. What's the families in crisis? So it could be anything from domestic violence to being on the poverty line, that sort of thing. And we did like a year campaign. And a lot of what we did, we made a lot of fanfare about, and it was, I mean, it was good at the time. We did raise thousands for this one charity. However, we started getting we were on TV a couple of times. We were also on radio. I did several um, interviews for radio. One was for the BBC. We were on ITV, which is another main broadcasting channel. And I mean, ultimately, the problem was we became so fixated on exposure that that unfortunately we all the kind of people who founded it all started to fall apart, and unfortunately it all kind of disintegrated over about a year and a half period. It started fantastic and all the intentions were great, but the problem was that the motivation almost became to have as much exposure as we could. We were still doing good and we were still motivated to help, but something else had taken precedent. So yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener in that respect. So there's it's I don't think it's even just a case of it's not just even a case of how maybe it makes somebody feel, or how it how people would perceive it. I think inherently there's something quite, you know, quite dangerous there in terms of spirituality and that sort of thing. It's almost like clutching at the material too much again.
yeah. Well, you use the words, "it all started to fall apart," and it came to mind for me was pride comes before the fall, right? We get so prideful about the things that we think we're doing good in the world, and then that's when things start to fall apart. But think about that. That's why we are not supposed to have solely a works-based faith. Not that we aren't supposed to be doing works to complement our faith, but that it can't be based on works alone. You know, we have to be humble. And if we are out there saying, well, I did all of the best things that I could possibly do today, you know, I brought 6 homeless people into my house for dinner, and I saved a dozen cats, and you know, all of these things, you rescued an orphan, and then it becomes all about the works, and it becomes very ego driven. And that is where we tend to fall, because the ego is so intimately connected with our physical bodies, our physical needs, right? The ego is the aspect of ourself that says, oh, you need to eat. Oh, you need to sleep. You know, oh, that thing could hurt you, so you may not want to go near that. It's there to protect us and to make sure that we stay alive. But it's a hungry beast, that ego, and it can end up devouring every good thing that you do in an effort to make yourself look more appealing to other people. Because what's another really important need? Yes, we need sleep, we need food, we need water, all of those things, but we also need acceptance. We need community. Our species is so communal. It's ridiculous. We need that to thrive. And they have even done studies to where people who have not been exposed to human affection, human interaction, actually will die from loneliness. So it is a necessity, but especially in this day and age, when we have so much focus on social media and everybody's creating content. Not that creating content is bad, but we see a lot of people who are content creators that are very much fixated on their own image. They want their face to be front and center on everything. And personally, it makes me feel really uncomfortable to be on camera at all. But um, it can be a very dangerous thing when you are seeking more likes and more subscribes and more comments and share this and do that, and your face is the main focus. Then just like you said, you know, you were looking for more exposure, looking for more exposure, looking for more exposure. It became less about your heart and what you were actually doing from the heart, and more about putting your name out there, being seen, getting the recognition, even if it was to draw in more donations. What you were doing was great, but because of the misdirected intention, that whole thing fizzled. And how much more could you guys have done for that charity had it not fizzled? You know what I mean? So keeping that in mind as we go about our lives and we think about the things that we can do for others, if we can keep it from egoic attachment and just do it because, no other reason, even if it's something that you are getting paid to do. And hear me on this, Katie. You can receive monetary compensation for a job that you do that is helpful to someone else. It's an energy exchange. But are you doing it solely for the money? Are you doing it solely for the ego? Neither of those things are going to end well. They're both tied to the physical. They're both tied to the body. And the truth of the matter is, you will never be satisfied fully by that which is in the physical. But if you are walking a kingdom walk, if you are walking the path toward righteousness, Not saying that you are righteous. I mean, good for you if you are, but if you're walking towards righteousness, if you are seeking to perfect yourself every day compared to what you were yesterday, being better every day than you were before, then you are not going to be fixated on the things of the flesh. You're not, it's irrelevant. It's insignificant. And you're going to be much better off. You're going to see so many more gains, especially spiritually. And I think relationally too. I think when we do things out of the kindness of our heart, out of the love for other people, yes, we are gratified in that. It did feel good to sit down and share your chips with a man who was not as fortunate as you, right? But that alone was food for your soul, and it gave that other person a relational experience that he maybe hadn't had in a while. So the impact of your actions far outweighed anything that you could even comprehend. Okay. All right. So how are we doing, guys? Are we doing okay? I know it's taken us a little bit longer than usual to get through this stuff, but it's good stuff. If we need to stop early, please let me know. We can cut out early, but I don't have anywhere I have to be, so. Okay. Ready for verse 63?
Yes.
Jesus said, "There was a rich person who had a great deal of money. He said, 'I shall invest my money so that I may sow, reap, plant, and fill my storehouses with produce, that I may lack nothing.' These were the things he was thinking in his heart, but that very night he died." Anyone here with 2 ears had better listen. So again, if you got the ears, pay attention and listen, right? I'm going to read some of these other verses and then we'll discuss this a little bit. Luke 12:16-21. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruits. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. All right, so I'm also going to read from Sirach. This is, I'm going to read this from 2 different translations. Remember that this book is from the Apocrypha. So it used to be part of the Bible and it has since been removed. Okay. You can still find it in the Catholic Apocrypha, but it used to be part of the Bible. There is that waxeth rich by his wariness and pinching, and this is the portion of his reward. Whereas he saith, I have found rest, and now will eat continually of my goods. And yet he knoweth not what time shall come upon him, and that he must leave those things to others and die. So this is from the King James Version. Okay, now I'm going to read from the Revised Standard Version. There is a man which is rich through his diligence and self-denial, and this is the reward allotted to him. When he says, I have found rest, and now I shall enjoy my goods, he does not know how much time will pass until he leaves them to others and dies. So, This man worked so hard. He played it smart. Right? He thought he was doing everything right, storing up stuff. Makes me think of preppers. Nothing wrong with being a prepper if you are one, but I am not of the belief that I should be a prepper. Now, yes, I do have some food stored up because it's always good to have extra on hand when you have 4 hungry mouths to feed. But I don't have like a bunker full of food and supplies. I have the basics. I know people though who are storing up mass amounts of food, okay? And I have seen a common problem among these folks. They find that their food spoils. So for example, I had a friend that had quite a bit of grain in canning jars, and the canning jars had been vacuum sealed, so they should have been safe. But what they didn't know was while they were canning those grains, a moth had come around and laid eggs in the bag of grain. So every single jar that had grain was ruined. It was filled with moths. So they did all of that storing up for nothing. They had to throw all of it away. Now, this man has a super harsh reality in that he doesn't even get to enjoy his stores. He has to leave them to someone else. And how often do we do things like this? We hoard things away. And what's the expression? You can't take it with you when you go, right? What is it? I've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. You can't take these things with you. They're just physical things. And I have some hoarders in my family. My grandmother, bless her heart, is quite fond of her things. And it's to the point now where she barely has space to walk. Her whole house is just kind of like a narrow pathway. And it's sad. It's heartbreaking. Yes, you're right. It is all energy, and it's stagnant energy. And if we look at like the art of feng shui, right, it's blocking the flow of energy, right? She will never get to enjoy all of those things because she can't get to them, for one, and for two, she has no room to enjoy them, or no room to enjoy her life in general, for that matter. It's gotten so bad to where she can't even get to her oven to cook. Yes, what emotions are those holding? It's very unfortunate. And what are we blocking when we are so concerned with storing things up? Now, this is a little bit different than consumption. I have my own views on consumption. I think that we are a nation of consumers here in America. I'm not sure how it is where you are, John, but here in America, it's all about consumption, and it's obnoxious. People are just constantly hungry for more. There's never enough, and I look at these two extremes where you have people who are living in tents on the sides of highways that barely have, a couple days worth of clothes. They're lucky if they have something to eat that night. And then you've got other people in these massive houses full of stuff that they never use. And it's it's insane. And I can't lie and say that I have not been a consumer myself. I most certainly have. And it really doesn't feel that great, to just keep getting more and more and more. And I think it's even more detrimental to someone's own well-being when they're so worried about holding on to things. One of the hardest things we ever had to do as a family was to move into a 16-foot camper. We did the best we could to get rid of as much stuff as we possibly could. And it was challenging to let those things go. Coming from a generation who was raised by a generation of save everything because you never know what you're going to need, because they were dealing with, depression era stuff. They saw the economic collapse of the country and they hoarded everything, and then they taught their children not to throw anything away. Well, those were the people that raised our generation. So we're trying to like get rid of this programming and purge and like Katie said, get rid of these things that are kind of holding us back. And it is hard when you lose something. Again, this goes back to, loss of tangible things, loss of things in the physical realm. We get so attached to stuff. And you're right, Katie. We really do need to focus on being grateful for what we have. And sometimes we need to focus on being grateful for what we don't have, or for the things that are taken away from us. When I had a car accident many years ago, I didn't have a car for a while. And I also didn't have the use of my left arm for over a year. And I didn't have a job because I couldn't go to work because I couldn't use my arm. So at first it was very much kind of mourning my losses, right? But yes, the silver lining was that while I may have lost a few things, I also gained more time with my son. I gained more time to study the word. I gained more time to finally relax instead of working 12-hour days every day. I had the chance to see things from a different perspective. So while even though sometimes those losses don't feel great, they are always in some way for our benefit. I know I say it all the time, and I probably sound like a broken record, but Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who love God and are the called according to his purpose. All things, even that which seems difficult, even the things we don't want to lose, the people we don't want to lose, all of these things. I'm sorry, are you asking the verse? Romans 8:28. It's my favorite verse. Romans 8:28. It should be upstairs somewhere near the girls' room, I believe. Okay. Any thoughts? Yes, Romans 8:28. Yes. Okay. Moving into our last verse of the night. This is verse 64. Jesus said, "A person was receiving guests. When he had prepared the dinner, he sent his slave to invite the guests. The slave went to the first and said to that one, 'My master invites you.' That one said, 'Some merchants owe me money. They are coming to me tonight. I have to go and give them instructions. Please excuse me from dinner.' The slave went to another and said to that one, 'My master has invited you.' That one said to the slave, I have bought a house, and I have been called away for a day. I shall have no time. The slave went to another and said to that one, My master invites you. That one said to the slave, My friend is to be married, and I am to arrange the banquet. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me from dinner. The slave went to another and said to that one, My master invites you. That one said to the slave, I have bought an estate, and I am going to collect the rent. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me. The slave returned and said to his master, Those whom you had invited to dinner have asked to be excused. The master said to his slave, Go out on the streets and bring back whomever you find to have dinner. Buyers and merchants will not enter the places of my father. So does this mean that every shopkeeper won't go to heaven? I don't think so. So it's interesting that it says not enter the places of my father. It doesn't specifically say heaven. So I will point that out. But let's read the same story in Matthew 22, verses 1 through 10. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. Again he sent forth other servants, saying, Tell them which are bidden, Behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come unto the marriage. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise, and the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, and he sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. Then saith he to his servants, The wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good, and the wedding was furnished with guests. Very interesting story. So not only so the difference in this story was they all were saying, oh, we can't make it, we can't make it, we can't make it. But in Matthew 22, they get to the point where they actually kill his servants, and the king, in response to that, destroys their city. So not great. The thing here though is kind of like that idea of many are called but few are chosen. I love the way, I don't remember who it was, but someone had put it this way once: many are called but few choose. It's not so much whether or not they are chosen, it's whether or not they choose to heed the call. It's the same concept of you have ears but don't hear, right? This bidding them to the wedding is saying, hey, I am calling you to me. I'm calling you to sup with me. This is an intimate gathering. You don't just invite anyone to the marriage of your child, right? It's family and friends, it's loved ones, it's people that are close to you. And just like we talked about before, when they reclined together, when they shared a meal together, this was an intimate gathering. Specific people were invited, and they turned it down. They didn't want any part of it. Perhaps maybe that's the parables, right? Those little bits, those little nuggets of wisdom that are easy to digest, maybe they're turning them away. Oh, I don't want that. That's just crumbs. But meanwhile, they're missing the meat. Now they can't come to the feast. What are they missing out on? Because they weren't willing to take crumbs first. Now it's given to other people that weren't even called. Now you could look at this in terms of like the Israelites, for example. The Israelites were a chosen and holy people, right? They were set apart. They were called unto God, and many of them rebelled. Many of them chose not to come to God. And then what did they do? Well, God opened it up to everyone, Gentiles too. Oh, you don't like that? Well, that's unfortunate. You were invited and you didn't come. But even bad and good were allowed to come. So now we have a whole group of people that wasn't even invited initially. They weren't even meant to be there. But now they've got the whole lot of them there. Luke 14:16-24. Then said he unto him, a certain man made a great supper and bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, come, for all things are now ready. And they all with one consent began to make excuse. The first said unto him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go and see it. I pray thee, have me excused. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee, have me excused. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So that servant came and shewed his lord these things. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor, and the maimed, and the halt, and the blind. And the servant said, Lord, it is done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. And the Lord said unto the servant, go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you, that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. So now we have a slightly different story. Same general idea. This time it makes sure to note that the poor and the maimed and the halt and the blind were included in the people that were allowed to come into the feast. It didn't matter the limitations. They were allowed to come and sup with them. Now we're going to go back into the Old Testament. We're going to see if we can piece all this together. I found it very interesting that the text in the let's see, which translation did that come from? I want to make sure that I quote this correctly for you. Yeah, so it came from, some of it came from the Marvin Meyer translation in the Nag Hammadi, and some of it came from the Robert Miller translation in the Complete Gospels. But these references are interesting. So from Deuteronomy 20, verses 5-7. And the officers shall speak unto the people, saying, what man is there that hath built a new house, and hath not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. And one man is he that hath planted a vineyard, and hath not yet eaten of it. Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man eat of it. And what man is there that hath betrothed a wife, and hath not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. So these are, again, people that were invited, so to speak, right? These are, okay, the first one is the man that built a house. Another one was a man that planted a vineyard. Another one was a man that betrothed a wife. Should they not go and make sure that they have secured those things that they have done? What about the people that were invited? They had already secured an invitation, and they didn't bother. Deuteronomy 24:5. When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, But he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife, which he hath taken. Hey, that's great advice. I think that should happen all over the world. That first year, let them be together. Yes. But think about it. You are making a holy union with someone. You are um, joining together, like I said before, two as one flesh. And then you have to go out and do business, and you have to go out to war or anything else. What a terrible thing. The things that we busy ourselves with to destroy that which is sacred is just so deeply saddening. Think about when someone births a child, and what is it? I think the woman here in the US gets 3 months of maternity leave, and paternity leave is hit or miss. I can't remember if it's in Switzerland or in Sweden where they get an entire year. The mother and the father both get an entire year to be home with the baby. That's amazing, as it should be, because those are the things that are meaningful and important. We're always so busy with foolish things. Oh, I have to go prove my oxen. Oh, I have to, make sure that I get my rent. Oh, yes, I think that's intentional, Katie, that the way things are, they're meant to be destructive. Um, our society is set up so strangely. Zechariah 14:13. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. Oh, good. I'm glad you're home safe. I know Jess would be thankful. She worries about you when you're out and about. Um, think about this. There is no sense of community anymore. Not in this culture. It's very hard to find. I can't say there's none, because there are some pockets where it still exists. But even then, sometimes to a fault. I know, Katie, you have been witness to that, to see where the community is so close that they know everybody's business and they shut out outsiders, right? That's not really any better. Like, what did I say? The two greatest commandments: love God, love others. It doesn't say, oh, as long as they're your neighbor. It doesn't say, oh, as long as it's your family member. The good and bad, invite them in. Be willing to accept them all. And that's tough, especially in this day and age, because we don't know who seeks to do us harm. Again, discernment is important. Right? I was watching a video earlier today. Someone left a note for the delivery person and asked them to put on a shark costume that was in the box that they had just delivered, and go and take the key from underneath their mat and go into their house and play with their dog. And my first thought was, they have no idea who the delivery person is going to be. And what if that person decides to walk away with half of their stuff? It's a terrible thought to have. But that's unfortunately the world in which we live in. How do we overcome that? How do we get back to focusing on that which is important? Being together with community, being together with family and friends, and focusing on the important things instead of the trivial matters. I'm sorry, but money in the big scheme of things is kind of trivial. Sirach 26, 29 through 27, 2. I do agree with you, Katie. I do agree that we are healing these things. Thankfully, it's a new era. It really is. I would credit some of that to astrology, but I won't get into that here. The dawning of the age of Aquarius, right? Sirach 26, 29 through 27, 2. A merchant shall hardly keep himself from doing wrong, and an huckster shall not be freed from sin. Many have sinned for a small matter, and he that seeketh for abundance will turn his eyes away. As a nail sticketh fast between the joinings of the stones, so doth sin stick close between buying and selling. Why? Because of the love of money, the love of things, the love of reputation. Not because of the money itself. Money is just a tool, right? Kind of like how a weapon is just a weapon until someone picks it up and uses it. It's just a tool until someone puts an intention behind it. Same thing with money. Same thing with anything of the flesh, any physical things. Like I said before, your ego keeps you alive. For that, it's not bad. But when you allow it to rule you and you allow it to determine your decisions, that's a different story. Matthew 21, 12 through 13. This is the last one for tonight. And then we can have some closing thoughts. And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. Okay. Christ went into the temple, took a whip, overturned the tables, because people were in there buying and selling just for the sake of turning a profit. They weren't there to help anyone. Now, granted, the people that were coming into the temple were coming in to purchase burnt offerings. That's when it says that the ones that sold the doves were for the burnt offerings. The people would go, they would buy the animals, the doves, the goats, whatever, depending on what kind of sin offering they needed to give. They would provide them to the priest. The priest would do the sacrifice on the altar to atone for their sins. But at this point, people were in the temple yard. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the temple looked like. Okay, let me search it this way. So basically there was like a yard in inside of the like the walls of the temple. Okay, so right here. So there would be people in this area like buying and selling. So if you look, see all of the tents all the way around, that's all of the different tribes. And there are scriptures that tell you like who's positioned where. Okay. But inside of here, we have, this is like the throne room, and we can look at a different picture of that if you would like to see inside of that. But there was another place inside of here where the priests would also make atonement before going into the Holy of Holies. But only the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies once a year to make a sacrifice for the entire nation of Israel. Otherwise, they would do these lesser sacrifices where they would have an altar out here, and you could, bring an animal to sacrifice on the altar. But what had happened was this whole yard area had become like a market. You could buy and sell these things to put on the altar, whatever. And people were using that to turn a profit instead of just being there to help people with their sin offerings. And again, it's not that the money is bad, it's the intention behind how you're getting the money. It's the desire to have it just for the sake of having it, to accumulate more, to go, buy the fancy car, or to go find the fancy clothes so that you look better than everyone else on your social media feed. It's vanity, and vanity comes from ego, it comes from pride, and it is toxic to the soul. It is beyond dangerous for our spiritual well-being. We are not here to love money. We're here to love God and love people. That is all. We can do that sometimes with money. If we're giving to the poor that which we have and they don't, money can be used for good. But when we let it be just for the pursuit of money alone, or when we let it be like what you were talking about earlier, John, with, kind of a shift in focus onto something that probably resembles pride more than anything, then it's all vanity. It's all in vain. It's all for nothing.
Yeah, sure. I think I heard I'm trying to remember who the author was. I think it might have been G.K. Chesterton, who said, I think it was him, who said on pride, pride gives you nothing but can take everything away.
It's very true. It's very true. Think about it. In that time, now, even if you hadn't choked on the chip, okay, in that time, you felt good about yourself for what you had done. And had you shared it to social media, you may have felt good for a little bit longer, but then that's it. You had your reward. There's nothing else to it. You got your recognition here on earth. That's it. It's kind of like what is it, the 15 seconds of fame, right? You get a little bit of something, and then it fizzles out into nothing, and you're right back where you started. And then what do we have a tendency to do? Go back and do it again. Well, if everyone's going to see me, then I'm going to do it again, right?
Sure. And we're very keen to share all the good things we've done, but not necessarily the bad things we've done.
Yeah.
Why is it one and not the other, I wonder?
Well, we tend to only want others to see our highlight reel, and we do that because we only see their highlight reel, right? But I feel like some of the most meaningful connections I have made with other people that I did not know outside of, the internet were when they were raw and real and vulnerable about how prideful they were, or how life kind of smacked them in the face for being rude to someone or being envious or whatever it is, when someone is truly repentant of their sinfulness, it's very relatable. And I feel like those are the people that have been the most endearing, in my opinion. I can relate to those people. I'd rather see you're raw and real and messy than see only the best of you, because I kind of feel like, at least at least in my own experience, people that I don't really know that well are the ones that get only the best of me. My true friends, the ones who are closest to me, get all the mess too. So, I love you guys. You're gonna see my mess. That is all that I have for you guys tonight. Do you guys have any questions? Any final thoughts? I don't know how to get back to that. There we go. Oh goodness, I don't want to look at myself the whole time either. Any final thoughts? Any questions? I agree. That's the way it should be. Bring me all your mess. I love it. I love you regardless. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording and then we can go into a time of prayer.